Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt from the West Coast in the California studio this morning. I hope you are doing well. I'm not wearing the eye patch I promised you because surgery was postponed from Friday to today. So I get my little procedure on my eyelid done today, so I look like a pirate tomorrow. Long John Silver edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show tomorrow morning from California, then back to the Beltway. The world should have changed, as you know it, on Saturday. And not because the Browns lost yesterday, though that was pretty crushing too. And I'm praying for Kareem Hunt that it's not what I think it is, Achilles tendon tear. I'm praying that Kareem just has a calf strain that hurt a lot because he was crying as he went off. But I've known a lot of people with Achilles tears before, and that's sure it looks like they're shot by a gun and they go down and it hurts. And I'm just praying it's not that, but the down two offensive tackles, both running backs, dinged up. Baker Mayfield's second dislocation of his left shoulder, popped it back in twice in the game. They were just not good yesterday, and things went bad. So to everyone in Cleveland, Columbus, and throughout the Browns legions around the globe, let not your hearts be troubled. We play on Thursday night. Big Ben Chubb will be back. Maybe one or two of our offensive tackles will be back. More importantly, Jarvis Landry will be back. We'll be fine. But the world changed in August, and we found out about it yesterday, and I want you to listen to this. I rarely read an entire article, but this by Dimitri Sevastopoulos from the Financial Times. I stood up, shook my head, and said, "What?" It's a Sputnik moment, as my friend Captain Jerry Hendricks, retired from the United States Navy, has written about it in the past, and I'll tell you about it in a moment. But first, the article. China tested a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile in August that circled the globe before speeding towards a target, demonstrating an advanced space capability that caught U.S. intelligence by surprise. 5 people familiar with the test said that the Chinese military launched a missile that carried a hypersonic glide vehicle which flew through low-orbit space before cruising down towards its target. The missile missed its target by 24 miles, according to 3 people briefed on the intelligence. But 2 said the test showed that China had made astounding progress on hypersonic weapons and was far more advanced than the U.S. officials realized. The test has raised new questions about why the U.S. often underestimates military modernization in China. "We have no idea how they did this," said a 4th person. The U.S., Russia, and China are all developing hypersonic weapons, including glide vehicles that are launched into space on a rocket, but orbit the Earth under their own momentum. They fly at 5 times the speed of sound, slower than a ballistic missile. But they do not follow a fixed parabolic trajectory of a ballistic missile. Those go up and down in a parabola that can be calculated and deterred by SDI and similar strategic defense weapons. Not so the hypersonic missile. Taylor Favell, an expert on Chinese nuclear weapons policy, who was unaware of the test, said a hypersonic glide vehicle armed with a nuclear warhead could help China negate U.S. missile defense systems, which are designed to destroy incoming ballistic missiles. Hypersonic glide vehicles fly at lower trajectories and can maneuver in flight, which makes them harder to track and destroy, said Favell, a professor at MIT. Favell added that it would be destabilizing if China fully developed and deployed such a weapon, but he cautioned that a test did not necessarily mean that Beijing would deploy the capability. Right, Professor. Mounting concern about China's nuclear capability came as Beijing continues to build up its conventional military forces and engages in increasingly assertive military activity near Taiwan. Tensions between the U.S. and China have risen as the Biden administration has taken a tough tack on Beijing. It's actually just continuing the Trump-era programs, and I salute them for doing that. Michael Gallagher, Republican member of the House Armed Services Committee, said the test should serve as a call to action. Quote, "The People's Liberation Army now has an incredible capability to undermine our missile defenses and threaten the American homeland with both conventional and nuclear strikes," said Gallagher. Even more disturbing is that American technology has contributed to the PLA's hypersonic missile program. That means, as Gallagher knows, the Chinese have been stealing via the PLA's intelligence operatives in the United States the technology to give it this advanced missile technology. U.S. officials in recent months have warned about China's growing nuclear capabilities, particularly after the release of satellite imagery showing that it was building more than 200 intercontinental ballistic missile silos. That's up in the Slave province of Xinjiang. China is not bound by arms control deals. It has been unwilling to engage the U.S. in talks about its nuclear arsenal and policy. Last month, Frank Kendall, U.S. Air Force Secretary, hinted that Beijing was developing a new weapon. He said China had made huge advances, including the potential for global strikes from space. He declined to provide details, but suggested that Beijing was developing something akin to the fractional orbital bombardment system that the U.S. deployed for part of the Cold War before abandoning it. If you use that kind of approach, you don't have a traditional ICM trajectory. It's a way to avoid defense and missile warning systems, said Kendall. In August, General Glenn Van Herk, leader of North American Space Defense Command, told a conference that China had recently demonstrated very advanced hypersonic glide vehicle capabilities. He warned that Chinese capability would provide significant challenge to my NORAD capability to provide threat warning and attack assessment. Two of the people familiar with the Chinese test said that the weapon could, in theory, fly over the South Pole. That would pose a big challenge for the U.S. military because its missile defenses are focused on the northern polar route. Hu Jin, editor of the Global Times, that's the mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party, tweeted that Beijing would improve its nuclear deterrent to ensure that the U.S. abandons the idea of nuclear blackmail against China. The revelation comes as the Biden administration undertakes the Nuclear Posture Review, an analysis of policies and capabilities mandated by Congress that has pitted arms control advocates against those who believe the U.S. must do more to modernize its nuclear arsenal because of China. I guess that argument should be over. The Pentagon did not comment on the report. The Chinese embassy declined. One Asian national security official said the Chinese military conducted the test in August. China generally announced the launch of Long March rockets, the type used to launch the hypersonic glide vehicle into orbit, but conspicuously concealed the August launch. The security official and another Chinese security expert close to the PLA said the weapon was developed by the China Academy of Aerospace Aerodynamics. CAAA is a research institute under the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, the main state-owned firm that makes missile systems and rockets for the country's space program. Both sources said the hypersonic glide vehicle was launched on a Long March rocket, which is used for the space program. All right. First of all, to Dimitri, hat is off. You got the scoop, the Financial Times scoop. Now, this morning, Reuters has put out, China surprises U.S. with hypersonic missile test. Financial Times reports. Well, I read the Financial Times, so I read about this on Saturday, and I tweeted about it on Saturday, and I could not believe it got no coverage on the Sunday shows. It's like Sputnik without anyone noticing that Sputnik was up there in 1957. Now, a lot is out there at the Hudson Institute by Captain Jerry Hendricks. The Sputnik Moment, Historic Lessons for Our Hypersonic Age. And Captain Hendricks wrote this. He's retired United States Navy a couple of years ago for the Hudson Institute, and I suggest you go get it if you want to know why this is important. But it basically means that they launch the missiles into space, then the missiles detach from the rocket, the Long March rocket, and they go their separate way on a glide path that is controlled from ground and can go up and down and sideways, predict evasive maneuvers. In the old days, a rocket would go up and come down in a predictable parabola. Now hypersonics from space means essentially, in one blow, all of our defenses have been defeated by the hypersonic missile. And so we're naked to a nuclear attack. Doesn't mean they're going to launch a nuclear attack, but we're back to mutual assured destruction. And Ronald Reagan's great dream now depends on Israel developing phased directed energy systems as soon as possible. More on this, but it ought to be leading every news story in America today. And if you haven't heard about it, it just means that, per usual, American media is clueless about the most important story. Everything changed. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That clip is the clip that will decide the Virginia election. My guest, Salena Zito, columnist at the Washington Examiner, the New York Post, and at other places around the country, wrote a column about this election. Good morning, Salena. How are you?
Good morning, Sunshine. How are you?
I'm not so sunshiny. The Browns got blown out in Cleveland yesterday, and everybody's banged up. I think Kareem Hunt tore an Achilles. Both of our tackles are out. Nick Chubb is hurt. I'm just grumpy.
I got stuck in Steelers traffic, but that's all I got. That's as close as I got to watching them.
Okay. Well, I loved your column. I want to play this clip again. It's from this is Terry McAuliffe in the key last governor's debate talking to Glenn Youngkin.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
What is the significance, Salena? I've read your column, but explain it to people who haven't yet gone to selenazito.com and read it.
Well, I think the whole key to this entire race is one word, and that's overreach. And I think that that is the sort of chaos and power grabbing that the voters exactly voted against with Biden, and yet they are seeing with all of the Democrats. And I think that listening to Virginia voters, that is the problem McAuliffe has, and it's the problem that Democrats are facing across the country in these off-year elections. Virginia and New Jersey are the larger races, but even in small municipal races, I think that Democrats are going to have a big problem in a couple of weeks.
Yesterday, Jeff Greenfield did a piece for Politico that lists the greatest gaffes in election history, in modern American election history. Let's play this one again from Terry McAuliffe.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Now, Michael Kinsley, the great editor, defined a gaffe as saying out loud that what you're thinking, but what you should not say. Why shouldn't he say that out loud, Salena?
Well, because it goes to the heart of everything that voters have discovered about the power that school boards and, in extension, the power that teachers' unions have over their children. This is something that they sort of didn't pay attention to until the pandemic, and their students are at home, or their children or their grandchildren. And they're realizing that they have ceded control to their children, and it's not something that they want to do. And it's become this cultural phenomenon. The parents are understanding, hey, you're with our kids more than we are. You're not going because kids are in school for 8 hours a day.
Yeah,
you do not have the right to have this power over what you teach them.
When my parents ceded control to the nuns, even though Sister Benedicta in third grade was 85 years old, and I am not kidding, and even though Miss Bocone in the fourth grade was just a killer and was never going to win a teaching award, there were not Miss Bocone, Miss LaRock. LaRock was a rock in fifth grade. There were some great teachers like Sister Timothy Burnt, and they gave over, and none of those teachers were trying to politicize math.
Right.
They weren't trying to get you to do anything other than learn how to read, write, and do your arithmetic. That's a traditionalist view of a teacher job, and they worked endlessly for nothing. Catholic school teachers have done that as a calling, as a vocation for as long as Fred Hoover is still my English teacher from high school. I still stay in touch with Fred. And Fred has been doing this forever, and they do so for the right reasons. But in Virginia, the politics of education has really turned parents against bureaucrats and teachers with good reason.
Absolutely. Your children this is one of the things I think that our culture has our cultural curators have sort of misread, in that they do not understand how sick people are of politics being involved in everything that we do. It's not just in our entertainment. It's not just in our sports. It's now in our children's schools. And people have just had enough of it, and they're putting their foot down, not just in Virginia, but across the country.
Have you noticed that none of the NFL games have been riven by politics? There is no Colin Kaepernick. There is no kneeling. They got it out of the way early, and the players are aware that they were damaging their future. The NBA has shut up. Major League Baseball is very, very regretful of having screwed Atlanta over. I think the left may not have woken up to this, but the center left has sure figured out the way to tick off voters is to do what Terry McAuliffe has done in Virginia, which is cut out parents.
Right. But I think in terms of how it has impacted people, I think the overreach has trickled down into our culture. And I think that the tide is going in the other direction. It was a slow tide. It took a while, but people have finally become wise to it, and they want no more of it.
Well, I've just tweeted out Selena's new column. You can read everything Salena writes if you just go over to selenazito.com. You don't have to follow her at the Post and at the Washington Examiner or wherever else she writes. Just go over to selenazito.com. Thank you, Salena. Hour number 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Straight ahead. Stay with me. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt in the West Coast studio today. I'll be at the Nixon Library tonight wearing my eye patch. But Bret Baier is in town. I hadn't originally intended to go up and interview Bret. He is out talking about his brand new book, this one right here, To Rescue the Republic, Ulysses S. Grant. And so I offered, and Bret accepted, to go up and do the interview, though I might look like Popeye when I'm done with my eye surgery. I'm joined by Jake Sherman of Punchbowl News every single morning in my email inbox. I get a lot of junk, and then I get Punchbowl News, which I always open and read. Good morning, Jake. How are you?
I'm well, Hugh. How are you?
Good. Let's do a little promotion. How do people get Punchbowl News? Because it really is a fine, fine summary. We'll talk about it in just a moment, what I learned this morning.
I appreciate that, Hugh. So you can go to punchbowl.news or punchbowlnews.com. Both will take you to the same place. And just put in your email address. It's free every morning, always free every morning. And premium subscribers get 3 editions a day, plus a bunch of other stuff that we do in the political content department. We are now, I guess, 10 months old, and we are very excited, and we're growing big time over the next couple months. And so, you should definitely everyone should subscribe.
What do you make of Axel Springer springing the surprise on Politico.com? They're going to put it behind a paywall. Now, I don't expect you to comment on this.
I'm happy to talk about it.
Go ahead.
I worked at Politico for 11 years. It was my job. It was a big part of my life. I am not surprised. I think it's a shame for some people, but there's a market that will pay. I mean, I think that's what we're seeing. People will pay for good political reporting, and Axel Springer thinks people will pay for Politico, and I wish them well in that. It's definitely not surprising to me, given what they've done to Business Insider, which is almost 100% behind the paywall.
Yeah, I am not surprised either, but I expect Axel Springer will bring it back to the center. I believe that Politico, and you don't have to comment on this, has gone pretty hard left, especially your old digs, and that very objective approach to politics you and Anna and John have brought over to Punchbowl reflected this morning. And here's what I learned this morning in my Punchbowl News email. I was unaware of the Manchin letter to Schumer, and you report that House Democrats were too. Would you tell us what that letter was and why I didn't know about it and why House Democrats are upset about it?
Well, this has been out for a while. Actually, Politico did break the letter story a long time ago. Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer had a kind of secret agreement, so to speak, basically where Manchin said he would only spend $1.5 trillion on the reconciliation bill. Here's what I would say, Hugh, and I think this, and I think a lot of people are beginning to realize it. A majority is only as strong as its weakest link, right? Its most conservative or most liberal member. And Joe Manchin is the linchpin for everything Democrats want. And so people can demonize him, which is fine. One is allowed to have opinions about lawmakers, but anything they want to get done has to go through Joe Manchin. And that's just something they need to become more and more comfortable with.
So there is a $1.5 trillion cap. It's called the Manchin cap. Now, I missed the letter. I missed the whole story. I knew that Joe Manchin has always been upset with the idea of $3.5 trillion, but he voted to advance it. So I missed the entire story. I read about it in Punchbowl. Why did they not just from the beginning deal with it? If you got 50 votes and 50 against you, you've got to have Manchin. Manchin says $1.5 trillion, and then Sinema underneath that cap has her own demands, as do every other Democrat in the Senate.
They should have been. I agree. I thought it was crazy for them to vote for a $3.5 trillion budget, not because it was $3.5 trillion, but because they never were going to $3.5 trillion. So I don't know why they got themselves all amped up for that. But the left wanted $6 trillion or $10 trillion. So you know, that's kind of the reality they were facing. And now they have to deal with that. They have to deal with the fallout from that.
Yeah, to me, they inflicted upon themselves a defeat, an unnecessary defeat. They got way ahead of their front line. The furthest they would, if think in World War I terms, I hate to use battle analogies, but it's like going over the top into no man's land, knowing you're going to get slaughtered, and then going back to the line that you should have just built your fortification at, which should have been $1.5 trillion. Now, yesterday's news or Saturday's news in the Financial Times, Jake, about the hypersonic missile that China launched.
Yep.
I began the show with a half hour about that because that's a game changer. That's a Sputnik moment. Jerry Hendricks wrote about the possibility of that in the Hudson Institute 2 months ago, but now it's happened. They've circled the globe with a hypersonic missile, and it's a Sputnik moment. Any chance that any of the Democrats will realize this has got to change their priorities?
No, and remember, there is we talked about this back a couple months ago. There is a bipartisan China-related bill that came out of the Senate, Chuck Schumer and Todd Young, which was at some point called Endless Frontiers Act. Now it's called USICA. House Democrats have basically thrown that in the trash bin, said they have no interest in it, and they've not taken any action on it. So, no, the answer is they're not going to do that, and they're going to keep on, trucking right here and keep on going through their agenda. And I don't think there's going to be anything that's done. I mean, listen, maybe at the end of the year, there's been some talk of putting China-related legislation on the NDAA, which the National Defense Authorization Act has passed every year for 60 years, so that we have to imagine it's going to pass again. There's some talk of that, but not much in the way of action.
You see, to me, it is a Sputnik moment, and that I'm not talking about sanctions on China. It's an arms race because we don't have anything that can beat a hypersonic glide nuclear weapon. We don't. We simply do not have that. Their Long March rockets can't be knocked out at launch, and they get up there and they release these things, and you can't track them and you can't stop them. So we just have to increase our deterrent, which is the Columbia-class nuclear submarine, which is way behind schedule and underfunded. It's the easiest thing in the world. It's an easy win for Democrats to plus up from $1.5 trillion to pay for the Columbia. Does no one think in the obvious terms that national defense might make a winning point for? I hope they don't, but on the other hand, as a patriot, I hope they do.
Yeah, I think there's already a pretty big aversion to upping defense spending in the Democratic Party for a million reasons. And again, it goes back to what we're talking about with 3-seat or 4-seat majority in the House and a 0-seat majority in the Senate. That it just becomes difficult to have those discussions and to get into those arguments.
If I were Kristen Sinema, and I'm not, and I've never met her, if I would make my demand defense related, she would instantly propel herself into national prominence as a Democrat who was serious, in the way that Sam Nunn once was. There is no Sam Nunn in the Senate right now, right? There is no hawkish Democrat to whom you can turn for defense advice. Am I right about that?
There are a few. I mean, Jack Reed, who's the chair of the Armed Services Committee, is one of those people. There are people, I think, who are well-respected in the defense realm. The issue is just raising defense spending. Increasing defense spending is just a very difficult political fight for Democrats.
Jack Reed is understood to be a serious man, as is Angus King, but neither of them have made their bones or in a position to, at this point, capture momentum and say, by the way, on that $1.5 trillion that Joe has, within it, we've got to have $50 billion for Columbia-class missiles. So tell me the impact of all this on Terry McAuliffe. It appears to me, and I am thinking of the Kentucky governor's race 5 years ago when the polling was off 13, maybe 12 points. They thought that Matt was going to lose by 6. He won by 5. I think that's what it was in Kentucky. I think we're in the same situation in Virginia, though not that of a swing that people are not anticipated, though perhaps not that large. What do you think, Jake?
I don't know the answer to that. We wrote about this a couple days ago. I had a conversation with a senior Democrat the other day who made the point that they believe that Virginia has had a permanent realignment, meaning permanently a Democratic state. It's gone for the last 2 Democratic presidents. They've swept House races and they've just been really strong in Virginia over the last couple of years. And Democrats think that people are overthinking this and that Republicans don't actually have a chance. And the polls, which have McAuliffe, as you note, up 4 or 5 points, something like that, 3 points in some places, is just right. And McAuliffe is acting like he's going to lose for his own political purposes. Now, I don't know the answer to that. I have no idea who's going to win. I do accept the argument that there has been somewhat of a permanent realignment in many parts of Virginia, including Northern Virginia. I just think if Northern Virginia would...
Oops, we lost Jake. Oh. See, in the Trafalgar Group poll, which is the most recent, it shows it tied, just absolutely tied. And in my view, Massachusetts, which is a permanently blue presidential vote, might be like Virginia, because in Massachusetts, the locals vote in Republican governors of a certain sort, whether it's Charlie Baker or Mitt Romney, and Glenn Youngkin is of that sort. Serious, educated, purposeful, and driven by education and at-home issues. So Massachusetts is never going to vote for the Republican for president, but it often votes for the Republican for governor.
Yeah,
that's consistent with a blue realignment in the suburbs, because you're never going to get the Northern Virginia suburbs to vote for a Republican from any sort of conservative point of view. But I think parents are different, Jake. I really do think the school issue has been underestimated by Democrats. Last word to you, Jake.
Yeah, and I think, listen, and to bolster your point, we've seen closer races at the senatorial level over the last couple of years than we have at the governor's level. So, yeah, you could be right.
Jake Sherman from punchbowlnews.com. Thank you. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned to this Monday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined by John Bursch, Senior Counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom. We are in the middle of our sponsor, Alliance Defending Freedom's fundraising campaign. They do this once a year. Over at HughHewitt.com, you'll find the banner, which you just have to click on to make a contribution to ADF so that they can fight the fight for freedom, for religious liberty, and for individual conscience protection across the United States. John, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. I'm terrific.
I want to play for you a clip of Greg Abbott on Fox Sunday with Maria Bartiromo yesterday, and then get your reaction to it. Here is Governor Abbott of Texas.
Well, you make a good point about all the people resigning, because that's one of the problems with regard to the supply chain, because so many people who are being forced to get a vaccine do not want to do that, and hence they're leaving their jobs. However, to answer your question, clearly what President Biden is doing is unconstitutional. There is zero authority in the Constitution that gives the president or his administration the authority to mandate anybody taking a vaccine, and that's why we feel very confident.
So stop right there. John Bursch, I agree with this so far as it goes to people not employed by the federal government. Do you agree with this? Is Alliance Defending involved in any of the vaccination litigation?
Absolutely, we're involved in litigation, and when this executive order comes out, we would very much like to file a couple of lawsuits to challenge it. The federal government is supposed to be one of limited powers, and the states and the local governments are where general police and health and safety regulations should be taking place. And we feel very confident about bringing those arguments to the federal court system.
Great. I'm just glad to know that I agree with ADF. I just took that position in the segment prior, John, that this is a government, until and unless Congress says that the Commerce Clause is somehow implicated in the distribution of vaccines and thereby installs the president with the authority to order them. This isn't happening. Even then, it might not happen. Second big question. The ACLU fired a lawsuit on Friday against Loudoun County teachers who have said they will not abide by the Loudoun County policy that they must use the pronouns selected by their students, and they must use them in every class, no matter what they're picking that day. You know, that's actually an invitation to chaos. You know what high school students are like. I would change my pronoun every day just to screw with Fred Hoover, who's a good friend of mine now. But I mean, are you guys going to get involved and stop the ACLU on this?
But what's crazy about that is we already have a lawsuit. We represent 3 of the teachers in Loudoun County, and we're suing the school district over that policy, that very policy that the ACLU is talking about. So they're piling on, and what's ridiculous is that this organization, which once stood for Americans' religious liberties, including the right to free speech, the ACLU, has now gone 180 degrees in the other direction, and they're trying to compel speech against people's personal and religious consciences. It's outrageous that they would jump into this to try to persecute people and compel them to speak. And what's so sad about the whole thing, as you know, Hugh, is that when you call someone by a pronoun or a title or a name that isn't consistent with who they are, isn't consistent with reality, it's a lie. And when we tell lies, it can do great damage and harm. And there are few things that are more harmful than affirming a dysphoria in someone who has it. And yet that's the agenda the ACLU is pushing. It hurts kids and it violates constitutional rights. We are in the middle of that, and we're going to win.
So if you want to support Alliance Defending Freedom in the pronouns lawsuit, go over to hughhewitt.com and hit that banner at the top. Takes 5 seconds to load, and be as generous as you can. John, would you explain this policy to me from Loudoun County? Honestly, does it mean that Mr. Hoover has to sit there with Greg Reynolds and Mark Peterson on either side of me, the Meanie Money Mo, the three blind mice, the three monkeys? All we did was screw with Fred. And if we just changed our pronouns every day, he had to, and he has to use them. Is that what it means in Loudoun County?
The policy says if the kid formally changes their name or their pronouns or their titles, then teachers are compelled to use them. The University of Michigan tried this a few years ago, and there was a student who did say that he demanded he wanted to be called Your Highness. And I don't know whatever became of that at the University of Michigan. But, it's not simply the kids who are messing around. It's the ones who are seriously having problems with their own identities. And the best research that we have shows that 80 to 95% of kids who are experiencing some kind of gender dysphoria, if left on their own, will eventually resolve all those things and align their mind with their body. But if you go in and you start affirming someone's dysphoria, the boy who thinks he's a girl or vice versa, or, the non-binary or something else altogether, 100% of those kids will end up having dysphoria and all the problems that go with that for their entire life.
But, John, if I were making this argument, just tell me how you're arguing. I would not argue that, because that gets into science, and we know what happens when courts get into
we don't
science.
need to go there to win the case.
No, to win the case, you simply have to point out this is chaos, right? This is just absolutely asking for chaos.
Well, even more fundamental than that, the First Amendment guarantees every person the right to be able to speak their own mind and not be compelled to speak the government's message. And we already won this case once in a case that I argued in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the federal appeals court for Michigan, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Ohio. And they held that a college professor had the First Amendment right to not call students by their preferred titles and pronouns because that violates the First Amendment.
No, I'm not as sure about the Fourth Circuit as I am the Sixth. They might actually create a split in the circuits that you could take to the Supreme Court. But I don't even believe the Fourth Circuit is nutty enough to say, yeah, kids get to decide their pronouns for the day. John Bursch from Alliance Defending Freedom. Thank you, John. Alliance Defends on Twitter at the top of HughHewitt.com. Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt across 400 affiliates, including our new affiliate in Horseheads, New York, AM 1000. Good to have you along, Horsehead. I learned a few things on Wednesday night in Georgia when I appeared with Brian Westbury, Alfredo Ortiz, and my guest, Herschel Walker. First, I learned don't get between a Georgia fan and Herschel Walker to get run over. 2, don't ask Herschel Walker why he didn't go to Ohio State University. And 3, don't play Rocky Trivia with Herschel. Finally, I learned his nickname is Bo, which I never knew before. Good morning, Herschel Walker. Welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hello there. Hey, thank you for having me on.
It was great working with you on Wednesday night, and I especially appreciated a couple of things you said, and I want to go over that. Would you explain to people that because of your own mental health background, you work a lot with our troops to make sure that they don't let mental health issues get in the way of their coming home?
Well, about 15 years ago, I started a program called Patriot Support because, we have our young men and women that go over to these countries and they fight for this country here, the greatest country in the world. And some of them can adapt and some of them cannot. And they have problems, and we call them crazy because they may have a mental illness. Well, I went through a mental thing in my life after football, and I overcame it. And my thing is I want to get it and help the military by having this program called Patriot Support, where I go to a base and I tell them there's no shame to ask for help. I try to talk them through it and then help them to understand what's going on. And since then, I've been to over 400 bases all over the world.
You see, I think that's amazing, and I thank you for that. And people who want to get behind Herschel, head to teamherschel.com, teamherschel.com. I saw your fundraising numbers for the first quarter that you've been campaigning, Herschel. They were pretty hefty. They look like your stat sheet.
Well, they were pretty good, and I got to thank the people of Georgia and thank the United States, all the people that contributed, and I want them to know we got to continue this fight, because right now you see the left, they're raising a lot of money. They want to try to keep this seat, and we got to take this seat from them. I think the people can see what's going on, And I've told them this is not something I thought I'd be doing, but it's something that I have to do. We can't just sit on the sideline, people. We got to get out there and let people know that America is a great place. Let people know the state of Georgia is a wonderful place, and the way we're going to have to do it, we've got to contribute to my campaign, and I'm going to fight for you. I'm not going to Washington just to put another feather in my cap. I don't need that. I'm going to Washington to fight for the people and let them know that they can put some integrity back into this, into our elected officials when I get there.
Now, Pastor Warnock, now Senator Warnock had a very good quarter himself, so there's going to be a lot of negative stuff thrown at you, Herschel Walker. Are you anticipating that?
I am. I'm anticipating a lot of things. I think people see it right now. That's what's been thrown at me, and it's not about Herschel Walker. I think that's what people got to realize. Running for this office here and running for this seat is not about me. It's about the people. And whatever they throw at me, I'm going to be ready for it. Right now, when I decided to do it, I went through a lot of prayer. I prayed, and I'm ready. I'm fighting for something that's much, much bigger than Herschel Walker.
Now, I met your wonderful wife on Wednesday night, and she's a fighter too. But is your whole family ready for this? Because I know your son's kind of a YouTube star. It's going to be a grind.
It is. It's going to be a big grind, but and I think that's what people don't realize is my whole family. We went through a lot of prayer. This was never something I thought I'd ever be doing. But it's not about us. We're Christian people. We love the Lord Jesus, and right now, what's going on in this country is a shame. And if I don't do it, who will? If I don't step out there to fight for this, what is going to happen? I think then I become a hypocrite because, I tell kids every day, you got to sacrifice to make good grades. You got to sacrifice to be an athlete. If you want anything, you got to sacrifice to get it. Right now, what's going on in this country, I got to sacrifice something. My family got to sacrifice something because we don't like what's going on. My family, we're not going to sit on the sideline. We're great Georgia people. We love the state of Georgia. We love this country, and we're just not going to sit on the sideline anymore.
The number one attack on you, Herschel Walker, and we talked about it on Wednesday night, even it's not a political event at the Atlanta History Center. I was just getting your bio out for people, is you're going to be called a carpetbagger. You're going to be, he's lived in Texas. After Georgia and after professional football, he lived in Texas. He's just coming back to win. How do you respond to that?
Well, the way I respond to that is why don't they ask the people of Georgia? Why don't they ask people in Wrightsville? Why don't they ask people there in Atlanta where I go to the country store? Have they seen me there? They've seen me there over and over and over. And I don't care what they call me because it doesn't matter what they call me. It matters what Herschel Walker does for the state of Georgia. And they got to call me names to try to get me. They think they're going to get me to shut up, to get me to go away. But it's sad that calling me names doesn't bother me. I was called that when I was a little kid growing up. Right now, this is about running for a very, very important seat. This is about running for something much bigger than one person. So they're going to have to do something better than that than to just call me names.
Now, you clearly have President Trump behind you. You clearly have the former president's backing. What about the Republican Party in Georgia? Are they either going to be neutral or behind you?
Well, I think some may be behind me. No, I know some are going to be behind me because they've already gotten behind me, and President Trump is behind me. But everyone that get behind me know that Herschel Walker is going to have to do this himself. I'm going to get out there and have to show the people that I can get this done. I'm going to have to bring people together. That's one of the things I think this Republican Party got to do right now is let's try to come together to win this seat. And then one of the things I told the people, I said, guys, I'm not going to sit here and try to promise you the world. What I want to do, promise you, is I want to bring people together, both across the aisle as well. The way we get things done, we got to bring people together, start fighting for this country, start fighting for the state of Georgia, and that's how you get things done. Right now, this is not a big Democrat or big Republican thing. This is a United States. This is a Georgia thing.
So, Herschel, I want to close. Thank you for coming back. I got to ask you a football question, though. The Cleveland Browns depends upon Nick Chubb getting back in the game. Do you know Nick Chubb?
I do know Nick Chubb, an incredible Georgia guy that has done a lot for the University of Georgia, has done a lot for his hometown. And right now he's doing a lot for Cleveland. He got injured a little bit, but I tell you what, he's a tough guy.
We really didn't. I think Kareem Hunt last night took it in the Achilles. Were you watching that game by chance?
No, I wasn't watching the Cleveland game. I don't watch a lot of football, and I was keeping up with, with the Braves game a little bit, and I ended up watching some other show on TV, but I was trying to keep up with a couple of things going on.
Well, Achilles, it looked like maybe a partial tear of the Achilles. Did you ever have any kind of injury like that, Herschel? Because I don't know how hard it is to come back from Achilles injury if you're a running back.
It remind me of what's happening right now is I dislocated my shoulder in the Notre Dame game, and I dislocated my shoulder, and they told me I couldn't play anymore. And I'm like, why? They said, because your shoulder's out of place. And I said, you can put it back, and they told me they're going to take surgery. Well, I had them to pop my shoulder back in place against Notre Dame, and that was the second play of the game. I went in there and played, and we ended up winning the national championship. And I said, that's what is going on in this country right now. It seems like something is dislocated. We're not getting along. Something is happening. So I'm going to help them to get it back right by saying I'm not giving up. I'm going to let them pop this back in place, and we're going to go out there and get things done.
That's what Baker Mayfield did. He had his second dislocation of the season last night, went in the blue tent, popped it back in. We didn't win, but the Browns got back out there and played. That takes some strength. I sure hope.
It does. Let me tell you what, that is for a quarterback, even though it was his left shoulder, but that is a very, very tough injury for a quarterback, for anyone, because, you're going to take a lot of pounding on your shoulder. But, he has been one heck of a quarterback there in Cleveland for a while, and I think he's going to continue to do some great things. Been a great leader. He's been an incredible leader, and I tell you what, a great quarterback. So
he's going to be our guy in Cleveland. Let me close by asking you, you'll get ambushed a lot of gotcha questions, Herschel. What are you going to do when they come up and ask you, I don't expect you to know about hypersonic missiles in China circulating one today. I do by the time the race comes down. What are you going to do when you get ambushed?
I'm probably going to laugh and say, I think you're trying to make fun of me because right now you're trying to get me with one of these gotcha questions, and that is not what the people are really worried about. And they're probably from the University of Alabama since I went to Georgia. So that's probably what they're trying to do.
Herschel Walker, good to talk to you. TeamHerschel.com if you want to help out Herschel Walker. Herschel, great to meet you on Wednesday night. I look forward to having you back early and often on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hey, thank you. And I tell you what, I had a great time on Wednesday night, and thank all you guys for small businesses. Right now they're hurting real bad, and thank you for what you guys are doing.
We are happy to be there. The Job Creators Network was happy to be there, and Brian Westbury was terrific. Herschel Walker, thank you, friend. Do not get between Herschel Walker and people of Georgia. I've been run over a few times in my life, like when I got between people and Brian Sipe at lunch, or when I got between people and Bernie Kosar in Ohio. You just don't get between if I got between Baker and anyone in Cleveland right now, I'd be lying flat on my ground. But I learned that with Herschel in Georgia. And I know that Senator Warnock is looking every day at his numbers and saying, this is not good. Herschel's going to run me over like he ran over the USFL. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back on the Monday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show.